seminar today, or excuse me, our little breakout session, which again we try to do every quarter, um, is a little different. It is, and what we ask you to do, and if you haven't done it, it's okay. But we ask you to make printed copies. We're not going to share the screen, but there's two things we're looking at. Primarily, we're looking at this protocol. But first, I just want to mention for context setting this article that Rob and I co-wrote, and it's called The Catholic School Board, Sacred Work for an Apostolic Work. And I wanted to mention that because that article grounds and forms the context for the protocol that we are discussing. And since you all are so immersed in ILEE, as you were reading through this, you saw all the themes emerge that we've been talking about now for years, right? And in some ways, this is really an extension of the idea of the spiritual CEO, but trying to get it more within the context of board and board work. So just a few things that we had in there was one of them is to recognize that there are sometimes frictions between boards and school heads. And it's interesting, and I think Rob could speak more about this than I could, but it's interesting over the recent years when we're having one-on-one conversations with school heads, this is a topic that often comes up. And the way that we presented this in the article was, don't demonize, like these are all good people trying to work, for the kingdom as well. Maybe the root issue is it's maybe more systemic. Like, are the structures in place that make sense? Is the communication there that makes sense? Because sometimes it feels like maybe the friction is more about not understanding, each other. So what we're really trying to get at is let's try to create let's kind of look at the system that we're operating under. Second point that we have in there is to recognize the school board is a corpus. It's a spiritual body, spiritual CEO. Hey, a board is also, a Catholic school board is a spiritual body. And so when Catholic school boards talk about discernment, which they should, well, it has to be grounded in faith, in prayer, in contemplation. Otherwise, it's just decision making. You can dress it up as however you want, but that's what it is. And then I guess the final point I'll make was it seems like we steal a lot from David Brooks, but we should send him a little check or something sometime. But I think he's the one that talked about thick and thin culture, and how much our Catholic school boards have to be thick culture. And again, this is the protocol kind of flows from that. So that just, if you haven't had a chance to read it, we suggest that you do so because it sets the context. But let's dive into the meat of what we're doing today, which is the protocol, and quickly about that, because then I'll turn it over to Rich. Rich and I wrote this together. He from the board, a board chair perspective, with him knowing about and trying to understand and understanding the president's role really well. And I wrote it from the president's perspective, but also trying to understand the board perspective, and such. So it was a collaborative effort. I think one of the things that we want to be really clear about is neither one of us are saying that this protocol is the be all and end all, because it ain't. I was meeting with a diocese yesterday who's looking at a new governance structure, and someone had a concern there because the structure they're moving to, they're kind of pointing out the problems with it. And what I said is, there's no perfect structure. Like it literally does not exist. Okay. But there are things that we can borrow that make sense in different contexts. And that's the way we view this protocol. We would suggest that anyone just take the protocol, all and embed it, but rather there might be parts of it that might be of interest to schools, to boards, to presidents. And our thought is, hey, better to discuss this now before there's tension. Okay, do it in a situation where we can, have a conversation. So we're not in any way saying this is the be all and end all. These, I will put it this way, these are things that Rich and I thought about. Take it for what it's worth. So with all that, I'm gonna turn it over to Rich, and he's gonna talk about a couple of items on this. And by the way, we're gonna ask for your questions and comments. And at the end of this, hopefully I have a lot of time at the end for you to identify something that you want to talk about and share. So Rich.
Thanks, Kent. So I want to echo Ken's points that this is really about whether the president and the board have similar uh, expectations, and that's really built around experience. And so um, I will say that I suggest that most of your presidents have a lot of experience being presidents, and they wake up every morning and they spend all day being the president. And most of your board members don't. They are volunteers, they're part of the community, they think about the school, they care deeply about the school, but we don't wake up every morning and spend all of our day thinking about the school. So there's a difference in the backgrounds of both, and therefore our expectations of each other. Um, I'll also say that my experience on Nativity and several other volunteer boards is that most of our board members um, don't have a lot of board experience. And so some of the rules, some of the expectations for how a board should manage itself may not be built into the board. That's actually where this document came from, because I felt the need to sort of educate my board as we ran into some issues where the board was stepping outside of its lane. So I have two major topics. The first topic actually has three subtopics, and my plan is to sort of give you the topic, give you sort of a couple of sentences for why I thought that was interesting, and then invite your questions or comments to focus it on whatever you need. So the first big topic is stay in your lane. And again, that's sort of where this came from. My board was being challenged to stay in their lane. Um, the specific set of instances was actually hiring and firing. The direct the two direct reports of the president were having a severe personal conflict. This is the president's job to resolve. The board has nothing to do with this. However, the conflict was long running and impacting the business, and parts of the board kept feeling like they had to step in. And so the, the the process of trying to educate the board and say, no, this belongs to the president. If we don't think the president's doing his job, that's a different story. But his job, in this case, it's a male, is to manage the people who work for him. And we have no input in that. I would like to say that has resolved itself in a good way, but I would be lying a little bit. There's still people on the board who want to step in. Part of the challenge is that the staff knows that they can go to the board, or has learned that they can go to the board and get a sympathetic ear. So on the board side, we keep reminding people that they can't take sides in this. If a staff member comes and complains to them about something in the school, they say, go see the president. And uh, that is really important and really hard for us amateurs to remember. The side point on that I'd also like to make is that from the board's perspective, it would be really nice if the president would keep the board informed. So, um, and this is a slippery slope, right? So you as the president, you don't want to invite the board in to interfere with your business. But if, for example, you're hiring one of the key positions on your staff, it might be nice to ask some board members to interview them and support you. That makes the board feel part of the process and reinforces that, hey, I'm the president and I'm doing the hiring, but I'd love your input. So hiring and firing is the first thing that can get sort of dicey. Uh, leave space for comments here or questions or.
We had a
Yeah.
saying for the board is minds in, fingers out.
Yeah. Yeah. and sometimes it works. Um, so I'm actually the past chair of Nativity. I suggest strongly your boards have a succession plan, and we had a good succession plan that got built in, and so I'm the past chair for the next year, and so my successor uh, went through this training process with me of here's the problems that we're having with this particular issue. And Michelle is wonderful because every time she talks to the board, she says, okay, my lane is this. Uh, so remember that foundation of your lane.
Hey, Rich,
Sir.
when you said succession plan, you're talking about a board succession plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting because my board's all over me about a management succession plan, and president succession plan, but not their own. So I'm taking notes.
Yeah,
let's maybe delve into that a little bit, because there are some bylaws that have a built-in board succession plan. You know, chair-elect, chair, past chair with the terms.
yes.
Did you have that, Rich, in your own bylaws, or is this something that you all came up with on your own?
I modified our bylaws to insert that. But there's a second piece to that, Kent. It's the fact that the bylaws say that the vice chair is going to, you have to have somebody as the vice chair. And so, like anything else, when you recruit your committee chairs, so I went to the people I thought would do good jobs as committee chairs, and I said, "Will you please be the committee chair?" And then I had a list of 3 people, and I started with my best candidate, Michelle, who said yes and said, I would like you to succeed me next year. And so please, will you agree to that? And that was the fly that was missing previously.
For
Go
and there
ahead.
was a vote. I assume there was a vote by the board as well,
Yes.
right, to name Michelle as the vice chair, right, and such. So
So the way we
nominated.
mechanized it is we made the succession automatic when you got elected vice chair. You're vice chair for a year, and then you're automatically, no other vote, you're automatically chair for 2 years, and then you're automatically past chair for a year. I did not want to go through multiple votes and
Right.
and end up with somebody not doing the job.
Right.
So it's one
Well,
vote at the beginning of vice chair.
the beauty of that also, though, is that for that vice chair year, or whether it's called chair-elect, vice chair, whatever it might be, the person is sitting in on probably executive committee meetings,
Yep.
exerting, some authority or some work, within the board and such. And so it's just a great platform for success. And then again, the whole idea is, and then you will be the past chair, to do that. Before we leave that topic, any other schools, Boom, any of your schools have anything similar to that, Boom or others here?
So I'm just going to jump in. So
Yeah.
in a previous school, Kent, my experience, as Rich is saying, you're a vice chair for a year and then you're a chair for 2 years. I kind of like that. I've been in schools where they do 3-year terms, 3-3-3, and the thing I found being a board member there and also having been a president somewhere is, once you're the new president, you really want that board to be your board, right? You don't want the board to be 3 presidents ago, folks who are still there and all that. And that I think kind of becomes an issue for new people. In a previous school, 2 schools ago, where I inherited a board that was all kind of folks from the previous president, actually 2 presidents ago, and everybody had 9-year terms. So I couldn't get new members until my 5th year and 5th year as president. It gets very frustrating, because it's all father did this, and I'm like, okay, he's not here. He hasn't been here for 5 years, and that's what we're talking about. So that's one of the things that I like, Rich, when you said 2 years and a year for a vice chair, because it allows for turnover. Now, the downside of that is you have a really good chair, you get along really well with your chair, you know, you kind of do that, but then there's turnover. So I think you have to balance that, right? I was looking at a school last fall, and they had the same thing. They had 3-year terms, and you could be on the board for 3 successive terms. So I was looking at a board as I was interviewing, and I'm thinking, none of these people are leaving this board for 7 years, you know? And that was one of the reasons I withdrew from consideration at that school, because I thought, this is going to be the other school all over again. So that's one thing. I currently don't work in a Jesuit school. I work in a diocesan school, and I have a corporate board, and they're just basically folks who've been nominated by the bishop. They're folks who work in the diocesan curia, and we don't have terms. You
Oh,
know,
interesting.
just the folks the
Really
bishop
interesting.
sends over.
Okay.
And even if they
Okay.
have terms, I mean, the bishop only has so many people who work in the
Yeah.
curia. So,
Yeah.
so that's
Wow.
another board model that, you know, that would
Yeah.
be very, very different. And for those of you who, I'm looking around here, I don't know any of you, none of my cohorts here, but
Don't take it personally, Boom.
I
It's not a big,
know,
it's
I know.
okay.
Chase, you
It's
tell
okay.
Pat Ruff he should be showing up. But,
Yeah,
uh,
Chase. Yeah. Where's
but
Ruff?
for those of you who work in diocesan schools, right, there's a whole other canonical issue there for governance, because the bishop is the person, you know, who's the corporation sole in charge of that school, as opposed to religious schools where a lot of religious have boards, you know, that hold the mission of the school in trust. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. You know, we'll go to the, just one quick comment about that. I was at a school once where they did the state bar model. So it was chair-elect, chair, past chair, but it was 1-year terms. And I'll say, I don't think that does work, because, to go to your point, but like, so you really only had your chair for 1 year, you know, and that was too short. I do like the idea of 2 years. I think that's good, because the other thing is, that's still, like, talking about nativity school, that's still 4 years on the executive committee as, you know, chair-elect, 2 years as chair, past chair, which is a pretty significant commitment for someone's life, right? And so, but I think that 1 year was too short. So I like the idea of 2 years, Rich, that you have there. But let's go to your next one, Rich, because I know you have a couple more here.
Okay.
So.
And actually, it will resonate with Boom. I suspect we may disagree. My next one is board recruitment. And on several of the other boards I've been on, and when I became president, or became chair, the school president was deeply involved in recruitment of board members. And not that the president, in my opinion, not that the president should not be involved, but the purpose of a board is to manage the school and hire and fire, if necessary, the president. And so I think it's very important that the board governance committee and the board chair manage that whole process. You really want the president, just the way you would like the board to be involved supporting the president interviewing key employees. You would like the president involved in interviewing board members, but it's the board's decision, not the president's decision. So, and same with committee structure and what committees you have, who you invite to be chair of committees. I did consult with the president before I invited Michelle to be the chair. And if he had a problem with that, we probably talked it out. But hopefully, it's hard to believe that you would have a problem recruiting as a president with a board member. But there's this sort of incestuous problem if the president is hiring or bringing in all the board members, in my opinion.
And then you're bringing in all your cronies. I mean, that's you don't want that to happen either, right?
Right.
One of the things I found, Rich, was, but you're also, in some ways, as president, you're the person who gets to meet a lot of the community members.
Yes.
So you're also in some ways, the main source of names or recommendations. But then I agree with you. Then that should go to a governance committee, and they should be the ones vetting it. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a
Nominating committee or governance
Yeah, or
committee, some
nominating committee, whatever it
committee
is,
that
yeah.
yeah, that does that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that one? I would suspect, Rich, by the way, there'd be pretty general agreement on that. Like,
Okay.
I don't know how many presidents, and I'm okay now. So one of these presidents on here is going to say how wrong I am, but I would think that for the most part, presidents would think, no, board membership is for the board, but I do think it's really important to run. Hey, how about this person? Well, I'm in the middle of a lawsuit with them, right now over a property line dispute. It's something like that. But
Mhm.
aside from that, hey, that's the board being board, isn't it? Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
That's what we do. I definitely bring, probably more than any board member, I bring candidates for
Mhm.
consideration, but it definitely goes to the board. And, we've developed, I'm going to say we with the board, myself with the board, but we've developed a matrix of skill sets that we'd like to
Mhm.
see, and it's not only, what field of expertise they're in, whether it's finance or some experience in development or whatever, but then and governance. But then it's also, we're trying to get more variety geographically, demographically, things like that. So
Mhm.
we revisit that when we're like, we'll start the year and we'll visit that and we'll say, okay, we know next June we've got 2 board slots coming open. Where are we? Where are our, where are our blind spots? Here's what we're losing. Where are the skill sets that we need? And then we mission the board to go out and find folks. But, it's definitely, I totally agree with you. So you can't, the president can't just, I can't sit here and put my brother-in-law and my neighbor and my, and my sister on the board, just to keep me safe.
Yeah, I do know of a board at a recent school I was at where it was all just your buddies, and they were appointed for life.
Yeah. And you don't
Like
make good
literally,
decisions
I
that way.
don't.
I'm sorry. You just
It's like,
don't.
it's like, oh boy. All right, so Rich, let's go to you. You have another one here.
Yes, the other place where there's sort of a natural opportunity to disagree is strategic direction. Um, you know, the president is the professional. You are the most important advisor to the board, in my opinion, for what the strategic direction of the school is, but it's the board's responsibility to set that direction. Again, my past experience, not actually in school boards, but some other charitable boards, is sometimes the executive directors would get a little excited about, um, well, this is the way we have to go, and you, the board, better come along, or we'll figure out some way to get a new board. Um,
Hmm.
so part of that is on my side is also reminding the board that that is their role. So again, this process of educating the board. Don't go out of your lane. Don't mess with hiring and firing. Remember that you are responsible for strategic direction for the school. And so that's my point on that. Comments,
Other,
questions?
yeah, other questions. We do have some other folks here on it. Do you have any questions on that or thoughts on that one?
And
Oh, yeah,
can I chime in?
yeah, definitely.
Um, Shauna from Fullerton from Rosary Academy. And like Father, I have a similar situation. I'm a diocesan high school and we have a consultative school board. And many of the things that you're talking about, though, I can see coming into play. But I am my employment is a decision
Different.
of our superintendent and our bishop.
Right.
Yeah,
But
different.
I think something that I keep hearing is this like setting the strategic direction or board recruitment. We just had a conversation yesterday with some of my leadership because I struggle with that because unlike Father's situation, the diocese doesn't really get involved in that. Um, they want to know who sits where, but in terms of getting the right people to be there, I also then have to think about the other 2 high schools in our diocese and who's on theirs and who do we get. And so trying to find the right community members is where I think I struggle a little bit with the right people. But this idea of the board doing the recruitment, I really want to work with my board chair because I think that's something that could be a really important piece for us to avoid either the diocese coming in and saying, here, put these people on, which they're not doing unless we're talking about our foundations. That's a different story. But I think that's where I struggle a little bit, because when I came back to my position, I had to recreate the board. So I think there was a lot of the people that, hey, I knew, but then trying to get other people to help us build out the board, because we're at that point now where I have to start reinventing this, changing the structure a little bit. And we don't have the vice chair. And I think that's a really important piece of this conversation. I have a great chair, but it's like, how long will that person be able to help me? And so I
Yeah.
think we have to really look at how we govern the governance structure all over again, and looking at that recruitment piece. Even though we're consultative, I do think all of your comments about they can't be my friends, which is, I want the school to grow. I want it to be there beyond my term. And we're at that pivotal point. So I think that's a piece I need to really instill in my board, and just remind them that I need them to do that. So maybe I need to have them kind of read through some of this a little bit more and kind of
Yeah.
discuss the
And
role in greater detail.
And we could have a discussion with you all too, as an ILEE thing. But one thing I mentioned is that, you know, I've worked with advisory boards, Dawson, right? And I've worked with corporate boards. And yes, they're different, but there's a lot of things, they share a lot of the same things, you know, really. I know that, you know, the hiring, firing thing would be different, but the one thing they share in both is that your board members come from committees. I mean, that's your bench. That's the way I was doing it. It's like, so if someone is really weird or really odd or sees board, you know, as power or whatever, they're going to show it at the committee level, you know, or someone who's really, really good, so thoughtful, so mission driven, they're going to show it at the committee level. And so for me over the years, love to hear again comments from others. I think it was very rare to move someone onto the board who had not served on a committee beforehand, as kind of a little bit of a vetting process there. Anyone else have anything similar to that in your experiences? Or
One note
Holly?
on that. Yeah,
Holly's
hi.
in her-
One note on that. When you're in California, I think it's California. I don't think it's bigger law than that. There's rules around the purview that a board committee can have, and very limited. They can't have really any decision-making power. So we don't have any non-board members on our committees
Oh,
because
interesting. Okay.
because they can't have delegated authority when that happens.
What if the committees are advisory?
Well, if the committees are advisory, they can be, but our board
Yeah.
really likes them to, but our board wanted to have more delegated responsibility to the
Oh, I
committees.
see. Okay. Well, that's a good point.
Yes.
And Holly, we don't know where you're driving to, but I
I know,
hope
I'm
it's
sorry.
going
I've
really,
got,
really
well,
well.
as it turns
So-
out, I'm going to meet the past board chair who is still on our board, we're struggling with our new relationship. So more
good
than I
for you.
should have
All
shared
right.
probably, but there we go. So I'll be listening.
We'll leave it on that. All right. Well, Rich, what else from your end?
So the last piece is cura personalis. It doesn't really come out in the paper, but I'm reminded that the board is responsible for taking care of the president. That as the board chair, you're hopefully a good sounding board for the president. When my president was going through these personnel issues, he's got nobody to talk to except me. And so remembering that so from the board side, remembering that part of your duty is not just taking care of the school, but literally taking care of your president, I think is critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay.
I'm done.
Go ahead, Chase.
Yeah, I wanted to get Rich's intake on current parents on the board. I know, I think, you know, maybe it's a split, whether that's a good idea or not.
I come down very firmly that it's a terrible idea. the, the, I'm sorry. I know
What do
there
you
are
really
people who
think,
think that's
Rich?
a good idea.
I
Yeah.
concur, Rich.
I
Remember that
literally,
the board is hiring the president. You don't want a president involved or a parent involved in hiring and firing decisions for a school employee.
Yeah.
Just start
I
there.
totally agree. And I think it goes beyond that because I just sent this to a president of another school. I sent your white paper on board as apostolic work because it says in there, you know, that you shouldn't have parents on the board. And I think like a third of the board are parents. And what I'm finding as a board member, the parents, I think they can't, it's human nature that anytime there's sort of strategic decisions to be made, they're more short term looking because they want to see things that benefit their kids while they're at the
Yes.
school, and they're
Yes.
not thinking, you know, they're not thinking 10, 20 years out, which is what a board, I think, in many ways should be doing strategically.
It's it is in that article, and it's designed to be a little provocative when we put it in there, but we said, yeah, no parents on the board. Now, some of the reaction we received is that can't be done. Like there has to be. So again, the school that I'm working with is diocese. They ended up being no more than a third, and they all have to be from like ex officio, you know, the parent here, the parent, you know, that kind of thing. But when schools have primarily parent boards, it's always going to go bad at some point for the very reasons precedent, because they can't leave the immediacy of the moment, and it's unfair to them. Like they're in the parking lot and they hear about whatever, you know, it's kind of thing, and then you get the parent on who's like, why aren't we doing more with ukuleles, you know, because this turns out their child is the number one ukulele player in California or whatever, and it almost can't happen. And so I would say it, and Holly's excellent comment notwithstanding, parents can serve well in committees. And you know what parents become? They become past parents. Mm-hmm. And they're a great opportunity to bring in to yeah. I don't know. I think it's a big deal, Chase. I really do. But I tell you what, I know it's hard, particularly when you get that parent that has a load of money, you know, that you like to get on your board and such as that. I just think there has to be other ways to involve them. I don't know. Who else has thoughts on that? That's a big one.
Chase, my thought of two things. Number one, it's always going to be about playing time, because that's eventually what everything that goes up to the president's office is always about playing time, even though they say it's not. Number one. And secondly, when a board is setting tuition and you have parents sitting on that board and that's what they're going to pay, I find an inherent conflict of interest in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Others. Carolyn, I see you. Carolyn's taking notes. By the way, Carolyn is at the Abbey down at Mount Angel. Quick plug, we're doing a retreat there next summer. You'll be getting something on it. It's going to be really good. And will we visit the brewery? You bet. And so, but Carolyn, like particularly when you were at St. Andrews in Portland, did you have any restrictions on parents on your board, or was it, or were there no such restrictions, or did you encounter
no
that?
parents? We had one parent who all of her children had already gone through the school. Really helpful, smart African-American nurse, and really understood the school and was a great board member. And I just wanted to say, Rich, the care and feeding of the president is so important. It's a little lonely at the top and you can't bounce the ideas off of your staff. And so that board chair president relationship is so important. And out of maybe 6 or 7 board chairs, half were super helpful and cura personalis, and half were kind of like, hey, I'll show up at the meeting, give me an agenda, and I'll run the meeting. So it is something that they should be forewarned if they're going to take over the board chair role.
Totally agree.
I would like to add to that, Carolyn. I totally agree. But I think, you know, I've seen, it just feels like more frequently lately that boards are increasingly intolerant. And you know, my whole thing is if you picked this president for a reason, you know, you just don't throw him to the curb and go get. It's not like there's a huge line of qualified people waiting. So, you know, I think the board, you know, it's sort of like seek first to understand or presume goodwill, but I think the board should be presuming goodwill with the presidents at first, and really trying to get them coaching, support, and things like that if they're struggling with anything before they just pull the plug. But it seems
Yeah.
lately there's, at least in my experience with a bunch of schools, there's been a lot less of that going on.
We're seeing this really around the country, and this was the genesis for this discussion that we, again, Rob would speak more about this than I did, but I've had a number of these conversations too. And intolerance would be a good thing, but also it's this like Mary Poppins thing, practically perfect in everywhere. I think there's not as much grace that's given, as well. I will say that Rich, I'm going to shift over to a couple other parts of the protocol. Okay. Great, excellent comments. I think this protocol is written in such a way that it tries to go, Carolyn, to the point you're making by, okay, some board chairs are going to be more warm and fuzzy, just like some presidents can be more warm and fuzzy than others. They might be more relational, just by nature kind of thing. But it really can't be dependent upon the personal nature of the person. It has to be, this sense of care has to be kind of built in. And I think the comments that I want to make that to point to is that's why, for example, I want to talk about evaluations, okay? That the evaluation process itself should indicate cura apostolica, care for the work, and care for the person in a way that's structured. And I've been struck by the number of people I've talked to where the evaluation processes are literally all over the place, and sometimes just avoided altogether, and such. And so I think one of the key parts of this protocol is section 3. And admittedly, there's a lot of language there, so I'm not going to go through all of this. But someone might look at it and say, well, that seems really detailed. Why don't we just trust and be with each other? Yeah, trust and be with each other. But that doesn't mean that we can't have what, Father Mike Garanzini refers to as, these are guidelines for saints, okay? Or, guardrails for saints. And so we should have some guardrails in place to make sure that the evaluation does take place, that it takes place within a particular time frame, that there's opportunities for the person to respond. And for the most part, evaluations should be formative. If they start to become summative, well, that's when it moves to an improvement plan. And so we did include in here that unless like some egregious behavior happens, and that requires firing right away, we're not talking about that. But for the most part, board took some time to hire the person. If there's a problem, then develop an improvement plan. Now, if I'm a president and I get an improvement plan, I know there's something amiss. Like this, it's not great. Let's not try to pretend it's not. But at the same time, if it's done in such a way that it's formative and the person's given a real opportunity to respond and grow, well, then that's a really positive thing. So to me, I think one of the keys to it, and again, we're not saying that the evaluation process we put together is the be all and end all, but I guess what we are saying is there better be an evaluation process, and it can't be one-sided. And it really also, I'll just final comment, then I'm going to open up to the room to see what you all have to say. Direct reports need to participate in that, and they need to do so confidentially. And so there should be some kind of instrument, I would say more, not numbers, but qualitative, more like essays or something, with the direct reports that goes to the board chair, with the understanding that the comments made by the staff or the direct reports are going to be held confidentially. Will they be communicated to the president? Yes, but, an amalgamation of them. Here's what we heard and such as that. Because I think it's really important for people's voices to be heard. I know I said it was my last comment, but really this is my last comment. At the same time, anyone who decides outside, a staff member or direct report that decides to complain about the president outside the evaluation process, they should also be allowed to do that. But Rich, you alluded to this. If there's any board members that a staff member gets the ear of and there's on the side, that can't happen either. So there should be a structure in place that if someone has a concern about the president, goes to the board chair, then there should be a process in place for that too. And by the way, that should include a fair hearing and by hearing, I just mean the president should be allowed to respond, in some way. So for us, building in these communication protocols and evaluative process might take care of a lot of those issues that might come up. And again, you'd be surprised in the number of places they don't have anything. Thoughts, questions, comments on that? What has worked well for you? What would you recommend? Anyone out there?
I can only speak on the negative of that, which is I've seen that happen. I've been on a board where, the president, the other leadership team members serve on committees and things at the instruction of the president, right? At the pleasure of the president. So, like, I have, our CFO is comes to every finance meeting, right? And and relationships can develop. But when you see, some friction with the president, and now all of a sudden, one of the leadership team members has the ear of one or two board members, and then they take sides. It's really messy. It's just awful. And I think, that's something I think the board chair, and Rich, I hope you'd agree with me, but I mean, I think that's where at very least the chair or the executive committee have to step in and say, whoa, 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 you're way beyond your you know, uh, uh, you're out of line. You're just totally out of line.
You're not in your lane.
But I've seen it get. Then you get, the problem is if it's coordinated, if you get like the CFO over here and you get the development director over here, and they're going to converge, and they've got 4 or 5 board members on their side, it gets really messy really fast.
Rich, thoughts on that?
Preston, I've been on a board where it's the same thing. It was a finance committee. The CFO and the finance chair, who was the board treasurer, kind of saw eye to eye on a bunch of things. And, the difference between, when the accountants run the school and when when the other people are the ones running the school. And then at every board meeting, they would kind of gang up on the president. And I kind of, I and another Jesuit actually were on here. We were both school presidents, and we were both like, hey, you guys, you can't be doing this kind of stuff, and not everything can or should be run out of the finance office.
Other thoughts on that one? Rich, what how do you see? I think I know how you see it, but let's let's hear it.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that that's a good example of the board chair has to have courage, because you're talking to people that you're peers with, the rest of your board members, and you're going to offend some of them when you tell them they can't do that. And you may have to tell them that many times. I spent a lot of time thinking that I needed to be very direct with some people who might not appreciate being direct with. So you need a strong chair. That's one of the characteristics you probably want to make sure your chairs recruit for their successor. The other thing that I'll not directly related to that, but related to your two other things. Having these processes written down for your school before you have a problem is critical. That's why we went through this process in my own school, to try and write this stuff down, to figure out, make sure when something happens, and it will eventually, you have a process to fall back on. You're not making it up. And then the other thing, I don't know how many people, presidents meet with their chairs on the cura personalis thing. I would meet with the president at least once a month, and usually twice a month throughout the year. And that's part of the evaluation process. That president knows when I'm feeling they're drifting off, and I know when they feel like I'm drifting off. And that's just part of being part of taking care of each other. So.
Other thoughts on this topic?
I think one of the most important things for board to understand, and I know it's basic, but the difference between the principal role and the president role. And I think sometimes, presidents probably get their fingers into operations, and principals are like, why are you always out of the building? Well, because I'm fundraising. So I think that's something that needs a lot of clarity from the get-go when hiring a principal and also when bringing on new board members.
You know, the again, I really wish I had more exposure to this when I was younger, but the rule of Benedict, and we actually allude to this in our protocol, is number 65. And I just want to briefly read part of that, where this Saint Benedict must have had an experience or two around this, because he says, too often in the past, the appointment of a prior, and the prior is the second person, right? So it's abbot prior, not dissimilar to president principal. Too often in the past, the appointment of a prior has been the source of serious contention in monasteries. Some priors, puffed up by the evil spirit, well, I mean, that's not funny, but and he goes on to say it's a problem. Let's just kind of put it that way. And so I think that if any of the direct reports are going to a board member, let's say the finance ones you're given, they shouldn't be doing that. Okay. But it really is on the board and the board chair. It's just what Rich is talking about. You can't have those conversations. Or if we need to have those conversations, we're going to do it according to the protocol right here. Okay. And so if someone does have a concern, principal, finance, you know what? They need to be able to bring that up. The president is not outside of a process in that regard, but do it the right way and not this kind of thing, you know, that happens in people's ears. I'm going to go to one final thing and see if folks have any other parts they want to do. I guess this is somewhat related to this, but under section 10, and I'm going to admit, I think my reference to the word consulter probably does borrow a little bit from Boom's heritage here, but I thought that a good way to go and to put in a protocol would be, let's say there is tension going on between a chair and a president, that either one should be able to just call a meeting and have someone outside the school who's trusted by both would agree to it, and to have a listening session. And I would say that the session is not to solve this or solve that. It's simply to share, you know. I got Terry Hickey, my wife, in my mind, where she'll be sharing, and I'll be like, hey, then how about this? How about that? And she'd be like, yeah, I really just need you to listen, you know. And I've been hearing that for a lot of years. I'll finally someday I'll learn. But the whole idea is, I'm not sure you're hearing what I'm saying. And to have another person in the room, a wise person that, you know, gets on, but not part of this power structure or anything like that, not a member of the board, just to say things like, here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm hearing, you know, like a Henry Nouwen in the room, you know, whatever. And so I think it'd be really good to put it in there. And it'd be really helpful to have a discussion. I say, before the lawyers, once the lawyer's involved, forget it. It's done. This would be, you know what? I'm struggling a little bit right now. I'd like to just have a meeting with 3, you know? So any thoughts on that? If not, we're going to move forward.
And I like it.
Go ahead.
It did something else kind of unrelated popped up, but I mean, how many schools have a 2-tiered board with their religious community?
So Seattle Prep used to have that,
Yeah,
the Oregon province. So
and the schools in
I think
the
they still do.
Midwest province of the Jesuits all have a board of members, or they did when I was there.
All sponsored schools, all Jesuit sponsored schools do. We're Jesuit. I'm Jesuit endorsed, so we don't have a 2-tier board. But
yeah, neither do we. But I've been on the boards with 2-tier boards. I'm on one right now, and that's a whole nother ballywick, right? Because there can be there can be dysfunction between those two things too. But when you were talking about conflict resolution, if it's done right, the board of members never really steps in. They want they want the board of trustees to be running the school and making good decisions. They're just there as a safety in case things go way off the rails. But I have seen it where those get a little wonky, but I do think when I'm thinking of conflict resolution, one of the people you might want to go to is are already on the board of members.
Yeah, but I go to Solis, and I think actually post bankruptcy for a lot of these places, board of members in particular are to be very, very reluctant to step into governance issues so they don't come intertwined with potential lawsuits because it's an employment matter, right? At that
It's
point.
pretty healthy. Yeah, I
So,
think that's
yeah,
healthier. So
yeah, go to someone else. Let me ask.
yeah, I mean, you know,
go ahead.
bringing in a consultant, like even bringing in one of you guys, but bringing in a consultant who has experience, that's a third party, that you know, but that can speak to, you know, this is the way high performing boards work, and this is what the relationship looks like with the president. That can always be helpful.
You know, be awesome at this is Rich Barth, by the way. So, sorry, Rich. Are there any other? Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our time here. Is there any part of these protocols that you really want to make sure that we talked about? Not hearing anything. Okay. So this is just something, again, that Rich and I put together as ideas. The thought is, I'm going to conclude. I'm going to ask Rich if you have a concluding thought as well. My concluding thought is actually just to repeat something that Rich already said. If things are going great at schools, now's a great time to look at this, at the language and such, you know, and a really bad time is to, you know, try to build that airplane in the sky. So now's a great time to look at this and have these protocols in place. Doesn't make our schools any less friendly or such. It actually, they're guardrails for saints. Rich, closing thoughts from you?
I like it. I don't really have a lot. I don't have anything else to say. I think we've covered the topic. Thank you.
All right, my friends. We go. I think we're good then. Again, this is recorded, and if anyone wants a copy of it, shoot me an email or maybe Victoria, and we'll get it out to you. I don't think anyone said anything outrageous here. I don't think so. I think we're safe. So God bless you.
I said that I didn't want parents on the school committee, school board.
Yeah, that's going to come back and bite you, Rich. But we'll
Maybe
see.
I'll get fired. That'd be good.
You'll get fired from. God bless everyone. See Cohort 2 and some of Cohort 1 next week. God bless you all. Thanks so much for coming today.
Bye. Thank you.